great. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have a fabulous panel of experts lined up here to talk about a very interesting topic. So streaming beyond borders, how to go global with your content. I'm joined today by Markus Hejdenberg, Head of Product Management at Accedo, Brad Danks, CEO of OUTtv, and Lexie Knauer, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Brightcove. Welcome to the webinar. Look forward to speaking with you guys.
Great, glad to be here.
If there's any questions, please put the questions in the chat and we'll do our best to answer the questions during the chat. So it really is a fascinating topic, and it's one I think that's on the top of mind for many companies that are launching, that have services in specific markets and are contemplating, expanding and growing beyond their own borders. There of course are the giants, the Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Apple TV, and other growing giants as well too. And then there's the smaller operators too, or smaller content owners who really want to have ambition to grow and to increase their revenue in different markets. So I just wanted to ask a question first to you guys. First of all, do you know how many countries there are in the world?
247. There's
actually 193. Well, I guess it could change too, depending on the definition, but there's according to Wikipedia, there's 193. Do you know how many territories or how many countries Netflix is available in?
I was going to say about 110, I think.
They're actually, well, from what I just read, 190 out of 193. So there's China, Syria, and Iraq, I think, or anyway, there's only a handful that they're not available in. So from what I just read recently, Netflix available in 190 out of 193. And others like Paramount Plus recently launched, they're quite ambitious as well too. They hope to be in 45 by the end of 2022. So that's a lot of work. That's a lot of borders to cross to get their content out there. But I think between the four of us here today, I think we're going to really cover off on a lot of ground. Brad's got some great experience to share with the experience of OUTtv themselves, who have gone beyond, as a Canadian company who's gone beyond the borders. And Lexie's going to share also from how Brightcove can support that growth. And Markus, of course, also how from an app perspective and a user experience, Accedo is able to support and make sure our customers are able to effectively and efficiently reach beyond their borders. I have one other question to ask you guys, and so we'll go around the table on this one first. Is there any content that you can think of now, content or service in your particular territory? So now we're, at least we're represented by two Canadians on the panel today. One panelist in the US, so Lex is calling in from the States, and Markus is in Stockholm. So is there any, it might even just be a piece of content or service that's not available in your territory that you wish was available that you could watch? Norkus, anything that you can think of?
Yes, indeed. We don't have Hulu in the Nordics or in Europe at all. So, and I know that there is a lot of great content. A lot of the content is actually licensed to any of the other providers that we have available. But there is a lot of original content from Hulu that we currently don't get that I would love to see here.
You know what? That's an answer for that. I'm not sure if that stole Brad's answer, but that would have been mine too, because Hulu's one that's also not. Brad, is there anything you can think of? It could be a content type or a specific piece of content or a service that's not available in Canada that you'd like to have.
It's funny, Hulu did come to mind, but most of the premium content that I look for shows up somewhere else.
Right.
I think the biggest challenge I have right now is that there are so many services that are available, but they don't have the content that would be home to them. I mean, you mentioned, Paramount Plus in Canada, a lot of that content sits elsewhere. And so the biggest challenge right now, I mean, we've moved more to an app world in our household. And so many of those apps in Canada are still pretty hollow. They don't have, the sort of robust amount of content they have in the US. And I know that's because they're under license with, other Canadian companies that have them. So I'm sort of looking forward to a more rationalized world in the next few years as there's more, there's maybe fewer services, but those services have more content. Peacock's a good example. There's virtually nothing on Peacock in Canada.
Lexie, I'd be surprised if there's anything that's available in the US that you wanted to see.
Yes, I'm very fortunate that I am inundated and overwhelmed with its premium content. And to Brad's point, there's all the premium content pretty much is everywhere, or if it's just in a different place, if it's in a different region. I'm also lucky to have access to a lot of French content or foreign content that has come into the States. A lot of anime has made its way over here in various forms, whether that's in Funimation, Crunchyroll, lots of fun stuff there. Kakao, Brightcove customer, has a lot of Korean dramas that have made its way over here. So it's a lot of fun. A lot of
I think
content.
that's exactly. I think in the U.S. you think everything would be available there, and the answer may be specifically some niche, ethnic or foreign language content. Maybe that some of that might not be available. Otherwise, most of it would be.
Yeah.
Good. So if we just if we think about one of the first challenges, really would be programming rights and securing multi-territory rights. Brad, do you want to maybe talk about the challenges that you've had with securing different rights for different territories?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the challenges are not complicated. It's really dealing with them that's complicated. And the reality is we live in a world with a traditional system where you had strong players in each territory. And so it's always been very, very difficult to put multiple territorial deals together because of the existing system. And this is what's happened over the last years. I mean, the number one thing is money. If you're buying content for more than one territory, you need to have the capital to be able to do that. We've been able to leverage our buying power across more territories. As you go forward, it's important to have more distribution and more territories so that you can make those investments in the programming across multiple places. But yeah, it's tough. It's particularly tough with the more premium type content because there's usually a buyer for that in every territory that is going to get in there. So this is why your goal from an SVOD perspective is to get as much exclusive as you can, and this is why I think it's driving the original programming, and not just at our scale. It's what you're seeing with the major streamers where they're pushing into originals because it's the only way that they can own content across multiple platforms, across multiple territories without having to do these strange, hybrid or other types of deals we've had to do over the last, decade.
So from a technology perspective also, I can imagine someone like OUTtv or any of the other services, it will really be a checkerboard of where the rights are available. So one territory it is, another territory it's not, one territory it's exclusive, another territory it's not exclusive. What, from the Brightcove or Accedo perspective, what tools are available to a content owner to ensure that the right available in the right markets? Markus?
Yeah, I can start. So from an Accedo perspective, there are a multiple of levels of content security, if you may. Starting from the app level, where we can set geo restrictions on the entire experience when someone comes in. So making sure that content rights aren't violated if you don't have rights for that particular territory. So we can do that both from locking the entire experience, but also filtering out content based on the territory that you're visiting from. Then obviously there is the playback, and I guess that's where Brightcove comes in, and that's yet another level where we set geo restrictions mutually, Brightcove and us.
Yeah, and Brightcove also has many levers and layers of playback restriction. And as it relates to geography, we can do that at the regional level, country level, territory if you're in Canada, zip code if you're in the US. So it can get very granular. And if you're really fancy, you can even do geofencing. So if it's in a particular unidentified region and you want to be able to hit that based on a location, you can do that. But that's not the only limits. We have a couple different levels you can pull from. You can set the number of devices it's accessible on. You can set that based on time, making it time bound. They can only access it for so long. So there's a lot you can do in terms of making sure that only the right viewers are viewing your content.
Yeah, I think there's sort of three things there that are super important when you're in our position acquiring content. First and foremost, the flexibility allows you to deal with the rights issues that are so challenging across different places. Secondly, a major priority, of course, is the protection of that IP. Many of the people that you're acquiring from are going to want to test that. The studios in particular, if you don't have a strong system, and we've been tested by all the studios at this point in time, both Brightcove and Accedo have flown through that. And if you're spending a lot of money on something, you want to know you're going to be able to play it afterwards. So those things are super, super important. And then finally, from a consumer perspective, you want to make sure that if you don't have something in one territory and you do have it in another, for some reason, that you are able to make sure that that's managed from a customer perspective. Because the worst thing you can get is if a customer is trying to get at an asset that they can't actually play. So making sure that that's separated is important, and you do that well.
And with respect to content that would be exclusive or non-exclusive, I mean, do you still will accept, and you still do have non-exclusive content on your service, Brad?
Yeah, we still do, but the world is moving away from that really, really quickly. And one of the reasons for that is that the major aggregators like the Apples and the Amazons, if you search for content there, they will show you all the places that it currently exists. And so you end up in competition with other platforms when you have non-exclusive content. So it becomes just do a search on Apple and it will show you, every single place that content is able to be found. And so it really is pushing you more and more and more towards exclusivity of content. And that's just the way it is. And the other thing too, I would say, is that a lot of the non-exclusive content is being put on AVOD services these days. And that's really where those libraries are showing up more than on SVODs.
I realized we didn't actually really start with an intro. Sorry, I jumped right in there and I was reading off a bit of a script, but Brad, a little bit out of order, but do you want to just give a quick description of what OUTtv is and how you started and where you are now?
Right. I mean, OUTtv was the world's first LGBTQ service. We started in Canada in 2001 as obviously a linear service back in those days. We grew the service in Canada. We've been globalizing in various ways for really the last decade, but it was in 2016 that we dove very heavily into OTT, starting in Canada. And since then, we've been globalizing primarily in the English language markets, which, obviously the US is very important to us right now where we are, UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. We are stretching out beyond that, but those are our sort of priority markets right now. Some of that is rights-based. Some of that is technology-based in terms of staying within the English language markets.
And I'm also joined today by Lexie Knauer, the Senior Marketing Manager at Brightcove. Lexie, thanks for joining. I wonder if you want to say a few words about Brightcove.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Lexie Knauer, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Brightcove. Brightcove is an online video platform. We help media companies manage, distribute, and monetize their content. We're a longtime partner of Accedo, powering the back end of OTT Flow. We are the underlying content management system, and Accedo powers the front end apps.
So on the point of language, in your case, then it's really an English language service. You target primarily the English speaking markets. You would probably have some foreign content, like even that we were talking about earlier, that you would maybe dub or subtitle. But other experience, I mean, Markus or Lexie, can you think of examples of customers that would also be using either dub content and need multiple audio tracks or subtitles also in different territories, and then how that would be handled by either the front end apps or the back end?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I mean, subtitling is just a great practice in general in terms of accessibility, especially if it had been broadcast. It's actually a requirement. You need some subtitles or captioning. If you have multiple different languages viewing your content, absolutely. And I also think people are getting more comfortable consuming with subtitles. A lot of films are starting to grace the Oscars, so I think it's a best practice at minimum. Dubbing, very expensive. If you have the means, it's a great thing to do to have localized content. But it's important to understand your audience and really know how they prefer to consume content and experiment with that, survey them. Generally, I feel like audiences are happy to provide feedback, and you can optimize your content in the best way, making the decision between the two. And in terms of how we deliver that, Brightcove actually does this on the encoding level. We are able to support both subtitles and multi-language audio tracks for those files. And then Accedo makes it accessible on the front end.
Yeah, and I want to tie into two things there. Maybe the accessibility part, because that's also extremely important, especially in the US, where the regulations are very harsh when it comes to the accessibility piece. And if you're a broadcaster, you're commonly using legacy systems when it comes to creating these subtitling formats, meaning that those subtitling formats aren't compliant always. The 608 formats aren't compliant with the new accessibility features that are coming from the OEMs. So there is a lot of work on our end, usually when it comes to this, to be able to make that compliant with each of the OEMs. And then tying into what you said as well related to dubbing and subtitling. And that's interesting because I think if you look at the reports that has been written on this, and there is a lot of them, there's a myriad out there when it comes to the markets that are what each market requires, basically. And I think it has to do with, first and foremost, the illiteracy in many countries where they can't actually read. So they have an aged population that can't actually read, and they especially can't read subtitling. That is a fast way of reading. And that we can see that predominantly in Eastern Europe and so forth, and those type of countries where that is very common. And when it comes to subtitling, yes, I agree. That's something that is best practices everywhere, and should definitely be a part of everyone that is looking to go outside of their primary market or the primary language market.
And so a user would be able to select their choice of either, if there is multiple audio tracks, from within the app, or even multiple subtitling different language tracks if they're available, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we have done this together, Brightcove and us, many times for many customers. So we have a good history and good knowledge on how to do this. There is also the cheap man's version of dubbing, which is actually doing just a voiceover that you can do. I wouldn't recommend it from a user experience perspective. That's an option to have one person actually read. And it might grow in adoption with the audiobooks and the adoption of audiobooks. So people are more commonly using this type of voiceovers today, and that might pick up. I don't know, might become a trend.
Little old school, when the lips don't match.
Exactly.
Now, as far as content goes, Brad, what about the importance of local content in local markets? I mean, is that something that you think is important to the growth of your service in foreign territories, that you also have local faces and local content that you produce or commission in different markets? Or is most of your content really of universal appeal that would show everywhere? Or is it an important mix of both?
There's an old saying that, everything is local. I think there's always benefits to having localized content and localized. I mean, we've made shows in the US now, we made shows in the UK. We've just made some we're just talking about one that we made in Sweden. We're making some stuff in, Australia. I think it's important to do that around the world. On the other hand, we're sort of an underserviced market. And as a result, there's more of a global view. So the content tends to play very well on a global market. So, we are looking forward to what's really coming, which is content quotas from a lot of the countries. So we're going to want to be producing more content in those areas. I think for every service, it's a little bit different, but at minimum, you're going to need a mix of local versus more stuff that's of an international type.
Right. It seems to be pretty obvious, I guess. Like, local is going to appeal to local, but I guess that really the best is make local for local market. But if that local can also carry and have legs in other territories, then all the better, right? Certainly if you're investing in it for one market, but it also has appeal in others, I mean, that's really the holy grail, I suppose.
The reality is original programming is very expensive, and you want to be able to use it as many places as possible. So the more international the shows are, the better. But, there are limits to that.
I guess that would be, that's, again, we're talking about English and North American perspective. I mean, I know some experience I had working in Asia at the time. I mean, certainly local programming was by far the biggest driver for ratings and advertisers, like leaps and bounds over anything imported. I guess some of our customers as well, too. I'm thinking of Markus. I mean, customers in Asia who are using our platforms and our products. The way they would approach it too, for local market, it's really going to be local content, and then when they go international, it's going to be the the bigger hits or a combination of the two?
Yeah, I think a combination of the two. I mean, yes, and we can see this in Europe as well. So most of the countries are, or most of the services that are in market services are dominated by local content, but they always supplement it with, in our case, big American content, because that's where we look to getting the big shows and the things that are more expensive to produce that we can't because we're too small a market, right? So I think that's what we do in Europe, but in APAC, they in Asia, they actually do supplement it with other Asian content as well. So they buy in the big shows from China and so forth as well. So we see a lot of that, having the local content but supplementing that with something that is coming from outside your own country.
Accedo and Brightcove are partners in OUTtv Flow, a service that actually OUTtv are using. So OUTtv, their direct-to-consumer service in these different markets is using our OTT platform, which is a combination of apps created by Accedo on the front end and Brightcove as a back end. And using that OTT Flow technology, Brad, you've been able to go into the different markets and actually even personalize the experience in different territories as well too, in different manners. We'll get into the different branding in a minute too, but you're able to also highlight different programming in different territories, because even though programming may be universal and appeal across different markets, you may have, for whatever reason, if it's a Pride Week in a certain territory or a certain, during a certain month, then you would feature different programming, or if there's one programming type or star that's taking off in a certain territory, you're able to promote uniquely in different territories too, using the system. Markus, do you want to maybe expand on how that's possible using our platform?
Yes, sure, and I'll let Brad chime in here if he wants to. So the way that our products handle this is that we work with something that we call variations or profiles. That means that you can set up your applications once, and then you can serve different content in different languages and different commercial models to simplify it, oversimplifying it a little bit, in various geographical regions. So say that you have your brand, where in this case OUTtv, you would want to serve different content to different geographical regions due to rights, but also due to what you just say, Gary, event-based, whatever it might be, right? So then that's easily being managed by our back office systems, where you can actually set up and configure that, and you can schedule all of the content based on the rules that has been set up in the system. So you can schedule, okay, so next week we do have a Pride event in Stockholm, then we want to have localized content, we might have a live coverage, whatever it might be, of that specific event, and then that will go out just in the relevant territories. And likewise, you can do a lot of this logic in Brightcove as well, where you can set up and schedule things as well based on geographical regions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the profiling in the system is really key. That really makes a big difference. So you've got the individualization, and then within each territory, you've got the homepage that you can use. So the combination of the homepage and the profiling are the key features, and they work really well.
And it could be like, if in the case of OUTtv, the interface is always English in every market, but you could be serving up different language interfaces using Accedo One or Accedo One or OUTtv Flow in different markets also, correct, Markus?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we do support being able to do so. There is a different levels of the languages that you have within your application and the way that you steer that. So you have the metadata, which resides within Brightcove and the video cloud at Brightcove, and then you can have different languages for the metadata as well steered there. And we can just from the profiling, we can actually just point to each of the relevant languages depending on the geographical region that you're in. So that's something that is extremely powerful when you're looking to go outside of your localized region. And I don't know if we're going to touch upon this, Gary, at all, but if you are considering a multi-brand strategy, and I know OUTtv have multiple brands that they have rolled out in various markets, then it's a little bit different, because the OEMs actually have a limitation, and that and it's a technical limitation, because when you start the application, you have a splash screen, and everyone that uses an app knows this. The first time you start an app, you get the screen, and that's where you load the application in the background. You fetch the configurations and all of the content and so forth. That splash screen cannot be changed within one set of applications. So one way you need to do this is either you do it by having separate set of applications where you have different brandings, or you have multiple logos on the initial splash screen, and then we load the different branding configurations based on the geographical region that you're in. So we have both cases with different customers. OUTtv have with us 2 sets of applications depending on the 2 brands that they have in different markets. But you can choose to go down either route with this depending on the strategy that you have.
Right, you want to mention your 2 different brands?
Yeah, we have a brand called Fruit TV that we use in the UK. There are some reasons for that I won't get into right now, but I think the important part here is scalability, in terms of both, and we are focusing on the English language markets. We are looking to second language markets with several languages right now, knowing that the system scales into those, both from a how we manage the content perspective, but also from the consumer side is really, really important. Because you just don't want to wake up one day and say, okay, it's time for Spanish language. We need to go find another service provider. It's good to know that that's all been thought out in advance for us, as we begin to make those moves. So it allows us to look at it from a more strategic perspective and not worry about the technological aspects of it having to be upgraded as a result.
And Brad, when you go into different markets, how much consideration is put into the different device platforms you want to be available on in the different markets? And do you do research? Are you before going into a market, will you be aware of the penetration of the different platforms before you go? And maybe there's some platforms that you're not already on that you'd want to be on, because in Australia one's more popular than it was elsewhere. I mean, how's that considered?
Yeah, I mean, every time we look at a market, we do a background research on it. We look at all of those types of things. So we're always trying to figure out, where that market is, and it does vary across territories. I mean, the good news is that the major platforms are the same. There's iOS, there's Android, there's others, but there are definitely places where there are, other opportunities. So, that's where we come to Accedo and Brightcove and say, are you with this particular one? And generally, if it's large enough, it has a market share, it's already been developed. This continues to expand. There's new, gaming platforms and other stuff that's out there. But you want your content. I mean, the basic rule is that consumers go first where they want. They're not going to pick, whether they're Android or iOS based on OUTtv. So we want to go where they are. And so, the fact that most of that's been developed already, and that, I think that both Brightcove and Accedo are more on top of that than we are. And because you're globalizing, it makes it so much easier for us that you've already done the legwork before we get to the territory.
Yeah, in the case of OUTtv and OTT Flow, it's a pretty easy decision for you to make as well too, because you're licensing the, it doesn't cost you anymore, in fact, to go into your markets on a platform you're already on. So you may as well just go as wide as you can, as quickly as you can on every platform. Others, of course, if they're making decisions based on high upfront development costs for a custom application, perhaps in a market, they're going to want to really prioritize which platforms are they'll certainly go down the list of the highest penetrated first. And as we know, also in certain markets, in Asia for sure, again too, where mobile is definitely the predominant platform to reach the greatest proportions of the population. Yes, they'll have TVs at home, but most of their video consumption or actually entertainment is done on a small device, on a mobile device. So they would always be the top of the list, and then kind of work your way down through the list. Where in North America, Roku is really high, but in Europe, I think Markus, Roku's gaining traction, but would they be further behind on Apple TV, for example?
Yes, for sure. So if we speak specifically on Roku, that's predominantly a North American thing. They are available in UK and Germany as well. But I mean, in the Nordics, there is no penetration, and the rest of Europe there's no penetration at all. And to second what you just said, Gary, related to Asia. Yes, they are predominantly a mobile first consumption market, but they're also an Android first market. Apple is lagging far behind, and it's just due to the prices of the devices out there. So the Android devices, whenever we enter with a product portfolio, there's always a discussion related to the devices that we support, because in Asia there is a couple of thousand different Android devices that we need to support, and it becomes usually not a big issue, but we also need to make sure that we have a sufficient test coverage to be able to know that we can actually support the lower end devices that is out there. And yes, we do see consumption, and the most amount of consumption we see from our end is on the mobile side, or the mobile and tablet side together with web. But we also see that the CTVs or the big screens are catching up, especially with long form content. So they are gaining traction when it comes to this. And so I think it's interesting to see where we're going, but this is predominantly a Western Hemisphere thing where we see that, because those devices are still quite expensive for lots of parts of the world.
Is it important from anyone in your experience, or what you know from other customers, and Brad certainly firsthand experience, to have any relationship with the OEMs? Like, are you in touch with Amazon Fire TV team in a different market to just see about promotion, or to get on, or do you just kind of fill out the form and wait for your app to get accepted there and launch it? Is there importance to have a relationship with the OEMs in the different markets to either ensure that your app gets carried at all, or gets any kind of promotion?
Should I also answer that?
Sure, if you got anything.
Yeah, yes. I would say it is very important to establish some sort of a business and development relationship with each of the OEMs. And we hold a lot of contact within each of the OEMs, and we do a lot of collaborations when it comes to them with promotional work and so forth, especially when it comes to deep integrations into each of the OEMs when it comes to the universal search, meaning that we can source the video feed catalog from Brightcove, and then we can upload it to each of the OEMs to be able to be a part of the universal search feeds within each of the OEMs. So that's one part, but there is also the submission part. And there's two parts to the submission part. It's the technical part and it's the business part. So usually with a customer like OUTtv, OUTtv handles the business part themselves, because they are the administrator of the account, and the technical part is handled by us. So if there's any flaws or bugs or anything that needs to be rectified that causes a submission fail, it's not common that happens, but it does happen. Then we will go in there and we will rectify that and help OUTtv to solve those issues. But if there is business side things, then usually that's handled by OUTtv and the relationship that OUTtv has with each of the OEMs.
Yeah, you mentioned once that when it comes to the business side relationship, that you found that it helps when they know that you're dealing with, your apps are made by Accedo, Brightcove's providing the video, the backend infrastructure. So that I think is considered like blue chip for them too, and kind of a seal of approval also when it comes time to engaging in those discussions.
Yeah, I think it's critical for us to have, just like Markus said, the fact that Accedo's got those relationships, and when they turn to us, and they do, typically what happens now is, Apple somewhere else in the world will say, look, we're on in the US, we're on in Canada. Here's who we are, and we should be fine. So having that experience with them in other territories, because they do sort of break out territorially. But once you're on with them in one territory, you can usually build out across the others. Now that, Markus and his team have done the work of working with the local to make sure that the technical aspects are going to be fine.
Good. There's two other main topics I think we're going to cover off on, but as far as, let's just talk about analytics also, and how important are analytics to your decisions in the different markets. I mean, would it probably, I can imagine it would drive decisions related to programming. So what's relevant in different markets, what's working in different markets, what's the value of the content, rights to pay from the different markets based on the analytics feedback you get. Does it, how else does the analytics and being able to see reports from Brightcove and Accedo help you make decisions on what markets to go in and which markets are, how they're performing in different markets?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. And I would say that one of the most important things and reasons that direct-to-consumer has taken off is to find out what the content performance is of things. The traditional broadcasting systems analytics are abysmal. I mean, they're awful. They are horse and buggy compared to the electric car world that we live in DTC. I mean, I can't say enough bad things about them and how they've twisted the industry. Your content investments are the most important single investment. We spend more money on content than anything else by far. And if you don't know what the performance of the content is, it's like driving blind. You can't do it. And so, that breaks down to total views of content, views 24 hours, 3 days, 7 days. What's the erosion of the content? How often people stick with it, but it becomes a huge part of your business as you go through it. And, I think the direct to consumer initiatives are so important in that regard. I mean, they're worth it, even if you don't make as much money in direct to consumer just to get the analytics. In that respect, customer acquisition and cost of acquisition is an important, metric as well. And again, you're able to know, the chain from the consumer, how they come in, and then how they behave. Your biggest long-term statistics are obviously retention and churn rate. Again, you very clearly are able to measure those things in ways that you cannot. I mean, you lose a subscriber in the broadcasting system, you have no idea why that happened. You have no contact with it. The systems are very much geared to prefer the larger companies. And then final trial conversion rates, bringing people in through free trials and so on. I sort of see those four as the cornerstone: content performance, acquisition cost of consumers, retention and churn, followed by trial conversion. The entire direct-to-consumer ecosystem favors those four important metrics because it gives you the data you need in order to run your business. And
is that something you would look at territory by territory?
Yeah, it's good to compare the territories and see what's different. The question would be whether or not it's your marketing or whether or not it's the content and how they go. And certainly it creates a lot of interesting questions for your team, but being able to see that so on such a granular level, you can at least begin to ask those questions around, what the data means.
Yeah, you'd have different levers to, react to that, the data that you see, and presumably the levers would be pulled differently in different territories depending on what you're seeing in the data. And as far as being able to report from Brightcove side, for example, does a customer like OUTtv, then they would see the plays by territory as well?
Yeah, we have country breakdown, device breakdown, engagement, where we actually take quartiles of where they dropped off. So it's really important to understand how content's performing and if there is drop off. And then I think it's really important to look at your analytics across the various platforms. You have Brightcove, you have Accedo, you have all the different OEMs that provide their own unique data, like the customer acquisition, where they're coming from. So it's really important to kind of take all of those different data sets and normalize them and understand those KPIs that Brad mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I just compare it to, because obviously we're linear in the traditional system. If there's fall off at a particular cable company, there's no way that I can figure out what the problem is. It's just impossible. But if we look and we see there's a discrepancy between an OEM, or if there's just something that doesn't make sense and you drill into it, you can sometimes find that there's a problem that you wouldn't either have known existed. And I think that becomes really, really important because, again, your major cost is in your content side. If there's something easy you can do to fix it, and it's not always the case, but maybe it is something that just you weren't aware of, that you weren't doing, or somehow something's not getting shown to the consumer properly. You don't know. You're much more able to identify that problem and deal with it.
Markus, anything you want to add on analytics?
No, I think we covered most of it. There is also maybe two other aspects to this besides the business and the video side, and it's the behavioral analytics within the applications as well, to understand how users are navigating through the applications, to know what content to present where within the applications from a user perspective.
Right.
And there is a fourth part of I call it a part of analytics, but it's not relevant to this specific use case, but it's related to ads, and it's being able to do ad tracking and being able to have sufficient data to be able to actually do ad targeting towards your consumers, so you get value out of your ad inventory that you have available. But that's so those are, I would say that those are the four ones that are the main ones, and I think that we cover them fairly well within the product for sure.
Yeah,
we'll touch briefly on ads a little bit later. As far as pricing goes, then again, back to Brad probably, but is it important, like, do you price in local currency always? And do you try to maintain a similar price in different markets? I mean, what's your strategy there as far as pricing across borders?
yes and yes. Local pricing is really important because of friction. Friction is a real problem, and having access to different payment methods is really important. Yeah, we tried to set a standardized price, and even though it doesn't, we started out thinking that we would come up with a price and then we would localize it by converting it, and that is more problematic. Like, for example, we're $3.99 in Canada, we're going to $3.99 in the US, we're going to $3.99 in the UK, and obviously those are different currencies. But we find that the difference in currencies is not that great. It's more important in terms of consistency. The problem too is a marketing one. If you're constantly changing what it's offered for and where it is, because a lot of the marketing is on social media, and of course social media crosses borders. So it's if you're running a promotion at a different price in a different territory, it does look kind of funny. Whereas people don't usually do that calculation in their own head. If an Australian sees it at $3.99 in Australia, or see $3.99 in Canada, and then they go in, it's $3.99 in Australia, they're like, okay, that's good. If they see it as $4 Australian dollars and 15 cents, they can't figure out why that's the case. So we find using sort of rounder pricing approaches is better.
And I suppose importance in your case, and again, I'm thinking of Asian cases where the payment method is going to be very important too, and being able to ensuring that you offer all possible payment methods, or at least the ones that are relevant, the most relevant in that country. And you may find actually going to India or somewhere else where you're less familiar with what it is, but when you find out what the local preferred payment is, you better make sure that you're able to offer that. Markus, can you think of any examples there maybe? Or
yes, and this boils down to the subscription management provider and the payment providers that you have available to you within your service. And another thing that comes to mind when we speak about this is the ability to actually be flexible, because having a payment provider in one region doesn't necessarily mean that payment provider will be right for you in another region, because it is very difficult in the payment space to be global. It is extremely difficult to be global in the payment space. So India is one example where mobile pay is and Africa is the same, right? The whole African continent is all mobile pay. There are payment providers out there that have plugins where you can plug in various payment methods, but that also becomes something quite cumbersome. One thing that is great though is the in-app purchases, because that pretty well universally translates in every market. So this becomes predominantly a problem on web, where you need to support local currencies, you need to be able to support local payment methods and so forth. But in-app purchases and the global players have solved a lot of this on a lot of markets for us, which is fortunate for both service owners such as Brad and us as a technology provider.
Yeah, I would sort of say that payment has been something where the innovation has been lagging. And I think definitely it's an area that needs improvement. it's just so difficult because of all the rules and issues around it. It's understandable, but and it's also one of the worst, cost centers for services like ours in terms of, bleed and additional costs. So, hopefully as the future goes on, there'll be more innovation in that area. It's not great anywhere. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And what are the best, or what do you find the different levers for promotion in the different markets, right? I mean, what are your most successful promotional avenues for basically awareness and also for driving subscription, of course, and repeat usage and reducing churn?
In Canada, it's easy. We have a big linear channel that we can use, and that's made a big difference. But in other territories, paid search, paid social have really become the two big ones. I don't think that's any secret. Everybody's doing it. Organic social, a lot of influencer campaigns certainly work in terms of getting the word out. And everybody is doing this now too, is that you're making content with people that have large social influence themselves, of large social accounts. And so you're leaning on your talent to help promote the product. I really think that, those strategies together have been the best that our team has used. Social media platforms are different in different territories. For example, we very successfully used TikTok in the UK. We've been better probably with Instagram in the US. It really depends very much on sometimes it's the content itself, but usually that is a little more territorial. And I would say using free trials is really helpful too on the platform. Free trials is an effective method. 7 days is much better than 30 days. Although I'm suspicious that free trials will gradually go away down the road. It'll probably be an advertising entry point instead of the free trials. But we'll see how that goes. We've had this problem in the past of people trying to come in, binge as much as they can, and then exit. I see less of that than we used to, but it's still, a concern. So, but free trials are good in terms of conversion, certainly at this stage.
Okay. And your service is SVOD, and it always has been, and presumably will remain so. It's been the successful model for you. Of course, customers or media owners and content owners that are thinking of going international with their content, it could be SVOD, could be hybrid, could be AVOD, there's or different versions of it too. Could be transactional in some cases, or a combination thereof. Markus, of course, we support that too on the different platforms, correct?
Correct. One thing that I see from, yes, we support it. So from that perspective, we're covered. But what I see in the market now, and Brad, I would like to gauge you on this, is that I can see that there is a lot of service providers there that are entertaining the idea of having a lower tier with ads. Is that something that you are considering as well, or have looked at historically?
Yeah, it very much is. I mean, there's no question about it. The advertising market's too large. We do very well in advertising on our linear service in Canada. So it's a market we definitely want to play in. It's tougher when you enter into foreign markets because, advertising is so locally, not nationally. There is programmatic to fill those holes at this time. But yeah, I think, I don't want to jump to the future, but at some point in time, we'll see more of this, free advertising combined with a subscription tier come in. And so as that technology, gets better, and it's there now, but as that technology gets better and we're able to put all the pieces together, we definitely see moving in that direction. There's no question about it. Our basic philosophy had been that the hardest thing to do is the subscription service side. It really is. But if we could master that, then it would be easier to then layer in an AVOD service as part of it, as opposed to starting at the AVOD side and then trying to go up to SVOD. We thought that was kind of the wrong direction, but absolutely the two are going to combine in some way. And you're seeing it very much in the US right now, particularly, I would say, with both Peacock and with the Paramount Plus service owned by.
And certainly in other markets as well, too, where AVOD would be predominant or there's good opportunities there. And so, Brad mentioned the technology needed to support that. Lexie, Brightcove, of course, does offer server-side ad insertion capabilities too. And do you want to maybe just elaborate a little bit on how you support customers who want to go AVOD or a hybrid model?
Yeah, the value of server-side ad insertion is that the content and ads are actually stitched together. So it's a seamless experience from beginning to end. There's no buffering in between ads, and that's all done simultaneously. To Brad's earlier point, he had the advantage of having an existing linear audience where subscription made sense. The value of using something like server-side ad insertion in OTT is the lower barrier to entry, the lower cost of customer acquisition. It's more accessible. You can tune in. But then having maybe some gated premium content to upgrade them to an SVOD or subscription makes a lot of sense. But as far as the way the technology works, something that's the beauty of server-side ad insertion is it's one universal URL that you can use across all your player instances. So whether that's web, mobile, or your OTT apps, it's all one tag, all one stream, and you're able to run that simultaneous auction with all your different programmatic partners or your direct sold deals with brands.
So I think we're getting pretty close to time. Are there any other major, like, what have we not covered that any one of you may think are important international and multi-territory considerations that we haven't already covered that are maybe not just SVOD and even Brad, what you can think of somebody not OUTtv, even if you can think of like, well, what would be a challenge or some other consideration in different territories and different markets. Markus, maybe you want to, is there anything you can think of or how we can handle that?
I think that when I hear Brad speak, I hear that you're very mature and you've done this for a very long time. But we meet a lot of customers that immediately think that they're going to roll out globally and they're going to make their service available globally, and take a long shot and think that's a good strategy. But it takes time. It takes investment to be profitable and successful in the respective markets, and you need to be respectful of that. And I think that from that perspective, I think that the marketing piece, especially to be able to bring awareness around your service, is the key thing here. And I think that there is a lot of things that we as technology providers can provide when it comes to how you're able to track the success of your campaigns and so forth with various partners. But there is definitely an aspect there that I think that a lot of customers that I see and I meet and I talk to, they underestimate how difficult this will actually be to build a global service.
Yeah, I don't think.
Sorry, Brad, go ahead.
I don't think anyone should underestimate it. It's so. I mean, when I hear that Netflix is in that many territories, I just shake my head. And and I know they've had billions of dollars of investment, but even doing it, I guess the one thing I would simply say is that everything is required. I think the content challenges are actually the greatest. I think the technology side has developed, particularly over the last, sort of half dozen years, but the last 2 or 3, it's really accelerated to the point where the technology is not so much the laggard, but both the technology, the content and the legacy content arrangements. Don't underestimate what a big hurdle dubbing is. I mean, it's an enormous expense. If we could just go closed captioned and subtitle, even subtitled in across the world, then that would move things a lot faster. But that's not going to happen. Those countries are not going to drop those requirements. I certainly think that's it. I think what we're really seeing is an evolving space where we will integrate linear as well, or some form of linear. I think linear will look different. We sort of see it as being maybe a 6-hour wheel or an 8-hour wheel that comes as part of your service, almost as a promotion, integrated into an AVOD system, integrated, with your SVOD situation. And so we see that world evolving. And I think the technology piece is incredibly important, that that you have a good partner and that you've got that platform that you can grow with. But don't forget, starts with content. And, Markus is exactly right. Marketing is never to be underestimated, because it's just really, really difficult. It's difficult to build traction. We felt late when we launched in 2016 to the marketplace. And part of that was because we really realized that we didn't know anything and there was a lot to learn. And we feel we've learned a lot, and with the help of our friends at Brightcove and Accedo, it's really helped us get get a lot further. But anyone who's looking to contemplate it, it's a long path. It takes a long, long time. You have to be patient, and you have to, it is that startup mentality of Silicon Valley as opposed to the Hollywood mentality. It really is the lean startup model followed by, iterations of your content, iterations of your product, and testing and testing and testing in order to grow. And I don't think there's any substitute for that, regardless of who your technology partner is and so on.
Lexie?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say, what?
I was just saying it's hard to fill in after, everyone's given all the answers to be the last one to chime in, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'll wrap it up. I'm happy to say it. I'll respectfully disagree with Brad. I don't know if the technology is quite there yet. I would really challenge our industry to do better and try harder. If you look at some of the major streaming services, some of the experiences are not great. They're still crashing.
Yeah.
That kind of speaks to the value of working with a partner like Brightcove and Accedo and focusing on the content, making that your primary business. You do have the giants like Netflix that are technology companies, but if you fall into this level, if you're working on localized content, I think it makes sense to outsource it to a vendor like Brightcove or Accedo, specialize and make sure that user experience is premium.
Hey, I'm with you 100%. I think the biggest mistake that people make is the do-it-yourself approach. I'm not going to mention who the other person is. Gary knows, but we got a very important piece of content from a studio, and we had a other Canadian company getting it. We shared it on a non-exclusive basis, and we passed the test with the studio for the content to be played, and they failed. But they're one of those, bigger companies that needs to do all their own technology and make it themselves. And I think that's a huge mistake. One of the best decisions we made right at the get-go was to find a good technology partner to do the heavy lifting on that side, so that we could focus on our business, which is content and marketing.
Exactly. That's the best way to wrap it up. I think, we offer the tools that allow you to go, to succeed locally, but also internationally, and relieve you of the burden of having to manage the technology and to be concerned with technology. You continue to push us too for what you need and what works for you. And we're not to say that we're perfect or that our job's done either, as, like Lexie says, there's still a long way to go and things are evolving, but, content owners and media organizations should focus on what they do best, which is programming and marketing and promotion and managing the service, and let someone else manage the technology. And that's what I think we do great.